All right, the second video, the lesson that we're going to be going over is fractions. We're going to be adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. Again, this is a review lesson. So the video previous to this, we did integers. Now we're doing fractions. And then our last review lesson before we jump into the actual chapters in the book will be diamond problems. So for fractions, your learning targets are going to be, I can perform operations on fractions. And we talked about what operations means in the last video, how it's adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. You'll know you can have it when you complete the assignment without a calculator, and you're learning this again very similar to the last lesson, how basic operations will help you complete math problems with more ease. The first thing that we're going to go over is a review of mixed fractions and how we can turn those into improper fractions. So if you remember, mixed fractions is when you have a whole number and then a fraction, and then an improper fraction is when you have a fraction where the numerator is larger than the denominator. So this first example, we want to turn it into an improper fraction. So you're going to start out by doing 6 times 2. You multiply the whole number by the denominator, and you'll get 12. And then we're going to take the numerator that we already have and add it to that number, and we're going to keep it all over the denominator still. So you just multiply whole number by denominator to get 12, and then you keep the numerator and the numerator, denominator and the denominator. And you're going to simplify the numerator. 12 plus 1 gives you 13 over 2. 13 isn't divisible by 2, so we're going to leave it at that. Same thing for the next one. You're going to take 3 and multiply it by the denominator. So 3 times 8 is going to give you 24. We're going to add that to the numerator, plus 7, and the denominator stays in the bottom. 24 plus 7 will give you 31, and that stays over 8. 31 is not divisible by 8 or 4 or 2 or anything, so you cannot simplify that one at all. So first rule, when we're adding and subtracting fractions and we have a common denominator, we're going to add the numerators and just bring the denominator over and then simplify. We're going to be working today with examples that don't have common denominators though. So we're going to use the least common denominator to make the denominators the same. We're going to add the numerators, keep the denominator, and simplify. So let's put those steps into action. This first example, we see we have 3/4 minus a negative 5/12. You can remember from the last integers examples that we were doing in the last Edpuzzle video that minus a negative tells you to turn it into addition. We want to find the least common denominator. So we have 4 and 12 in our denominators. And sometimes it's easy just to think to multiply those two numbers together and get 48. But the least common denominator is we can actually make both of these just into 12. So this first fraction, if we want the denominator to be 12, we're going to have to multiply it by 3. Whatever you do to the bottom of the fraction, you would have to do the top of the fraction as well. And now my denominator will be 12 over here, and this one's already 12, so we don't have to change it. So in the numerator, 3 times 3 gives me 9. In the denominator, 3 times 4 gives me 12. And we're adding that to 5/12. The next step when we're doing fractions is we just add the numerators. 9 plus 5 will give me 14. We put it over the denominator. We just bring it over. We don't add them. And I have 14 over 12. Before we circle that as your final answer, though, you want to simplify it. You want to see if there's anything that you can divide the top and bottom by. I see 14 and 12 are both even numbers, so I can divide them both by 2. Divide by 2, divide by 2. 14 divided by 2 gives me 7. 12 divided by 2 gives me 6. And they're both only divisible. They only have one that they have in common. So that's our final answer. Next example, we have 1/3 plus a negative 9 over 20. We again want to be thinking of numbers that they have in the least common denominator. And the least common denominator that we're going to be able to work with is 60. So we're going to have to multiply this fraction to get it to be 60 by 20. That means we would have to multiply this one over here by 3. So they both have 60 as the denominator. So first fraction, 20 times 1 in the numerator gives me 20. 20 times 3 gives me 60. Next fraction, negative 9 times 3 gives me negative 27. 60 in the denominator. We're going to add our numerator, so 20 plus a negative 27. 27 is the larger number, so we're going to have to keep that sign. 27 minus 20 gives me negative 7. That goes over 60. And 60 is not divisible by 7, so we end up with our final answer. No simplifying. Go ahead and take some time to complete this problem on your own. The least common denominator that you're going to be working with is 21, so you'll have to multiply the first fraction by 3, the second fraction by 7. This first fraction is negative, so I like to keep it in the numerator just so I don't forget about it. 5 times 3 gives me 15. 7 times 3 gives me 21. And the second fraction, 2 times 7 gives me 14. 3 times 7 gives me 21 again. Add the numerator, so negative 15 plus 14 gives me negative 1. Bring the denominator over, and there's no more simplifying to be done. So these ones are the same, but there's one more extra step that makes it a little bit harder. We have to convert our mixed fractions into improper fractions and then do the same steps over again. So my first fraction, 3/2. We're going to multiply 3 times 2 to get 6. Add the numerator. Bring the denominator over. And I like to completely finish this one before I work on making this one an improper fraction. So 6 plus 1 in the numerator gives me 7 over 2. And I can do the same with my second fraction, making it improper. Negative 4 times 8 will give me a negative 32. I'm going to need to add the numerator to that, the 3, and keep the denominator in the bottom. If you didn't see that, I just did negative 4 times 8, added it to the numerator, brought down the bottom. And now my second fraction I can simplify. Negative 32 plus 3 in the numerator gives me negative 29 over 8. And then I need to keep going. So I need to make sure that I have common denominators first. The least common denominator, instead of making these into 16, I know that I can turn this 2 into an 8 by multiplying the top and bottom by 4. 7 times 4 will give me 28 over 8. That's a horrible 8. Bring down the plus negative 29 over 8. You don't have to do anything to it because it's already an 8 in the denominator. Add the numerator. 28 plus negative 29 leaves me with a negative 1 over 8, which cannot be simplified. And then our next example, start out again by making the fractions into improper fractions. Negative 1 times 7 gives me negative 7. Add the numerator, keep it over the denominator. Numerator being simplified, negative 7 plus 6 gives me negative 1. over 7. And my second fraction is not a mixed fraction. There's no whole number out in front of it, so I can just bring it down. Plus negative 3/4 plus negative 3/4. When working with 7 and 4, their least common denominator is going to be 28, so I'm going to multiply the top and bottom by 4, this top and bottom by 7. First fraction, negative 1 times 4, leaves me with negative 4 over 28. Second fraction, negative 3 times 7, leaves me with a negative 21 over 28. Add across the top, negative 4 plus negative 21, same sign, so it stays the same negative. 21 plus 4 gives me 25 over 28. You cannot simplify it any further. Here's an example for you to do on your own. You should have started with 12 times 4, leaving you with 48. Add the numerator 3 over 4. The minus the negative turns into addition. So we're going to do 1 times 8 to give me 8 plus 5 in that numerator over 8. Keep simplifying. The first fraction, 48 plus 3, is going to give me 51 over 4. Second fraction, 8 plus 5, is going to give me 13 over 8. Least common denominator is 8, so I'm going to multiply this one by 2 on the top and bottom. 51 times 2 gives me 102 over 8. Second fraction is 13 over 8. Adding across the top, 102 plus 13 gives me 115 over 8. And 115 is an odd number, so we're not going to be able to divide it by 2 at all. We get 115 over 8 for our final answer. And then the next set of problems is multiplying fractions. Common denominator, not common denominator, it doesn't matter. You're just going to multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and then simplify. You have to make sure that you have 2 improper fractions to start out, though. So my negative 7/9 is good. I can use that. There's no whole number in front of it. For this example, though, I want to make it into improper by doing 2 times 4 to give me 8. Add the numerator, bring the denominator over. I want to simplify the second fraction. So 8 plus 3 gives me 11 over 4. And I'm multiplying that by negative 7/9. I can multiply across the top. Negative 7 times 11 gives me negative 77. I can multiply across the bottom. 9 times 4 gives me 36. Same thing with this second one. I have 2 times 9 to make it improper. Gives me 18. Add 5 to that over 9. I'm multiplying that with negative 3/7. Simplifying my numerator, I have 18 plus 5 right here, which results in 23 over 9. My second fraction is negative 3/7. I need to multiply across the top of my numerator, so 23 times 3. I can just do that by hand on the side. We end up getting negative 69. 9 times 7 gives me 63. Both of these pieces are divisible by 3. Divide by 3. Divide by 3. The top will give me negative 23. The bottom will give me positive 21. And that's left with the simplifying. And then our last is dividing fractions. Same thing, it doesn't matter if they have a common or not common denominator. It's very similar to multiplying, but you have to remember your first step, which you may have seen this video before.
Yeah, you know how this goes. Keep, change, flip. Simple, right? Dividing fractions. Vocabulary. Let's go. Keep, change, flip. Yeah, that's the action. Everybody's gonna know how we're dividing fractions. Keep, change, flip. Yeah.
So we're going to be doing keep, change, flip, multiplying your fractions, and then simplifying. So again, make sure that you change it to improper fractions. This first one, negative 5 times 2 gives me negative 10. Add the numerator, keep the denominator on the bottom. That's being divided by negative 3/4. My first fraction, negative 10 plus 1 in the numerator will give me negative 9 over 2. Divide by negative 3/4. And that's where keep, change, flip comes into play. So keep, change, flip says keep the first fraction, change the symbol to multiplication, and flip the second fraction upside down. So the numerator becomes the denominator, negative 3 goes in the bottom, positive 4 goes in the top. Now we can multiply across the top. Negative 9 times 4 gives me negative 36. Multiply across the bottom. 2 times negative 3 gives me negative 6. Negative 36 divided by 6, these are actually both divisible by 6, and dividing two negative numbers turns into positive. You'll get 6 over 1, which is the same thing as just 6. Next example, change this first fraction into an improper fraction. So negative 2 times 12 gives me negative 24. Add 7 over 12. We're dividing that by 1/6. Simplify the first fraction. So negative 24 plus 7 is going to give me a negative 17 over 12. Divide by negative 1/6. Keep, change, flip. Keep the first fraction, negative 17 over 12. Change the symbol. Flip the fraction. Multiply across the top. Negative 17 times 6. We're going to start with 7 times 6 to give me 42. 6 times 1 to give me 6 plus 4 gives me 10, and it's negative. Negative 102 over negative 12. I'm going to start out with negative over negative is positive. Oops. I know that these are both divisible by 2. 102 divided by 2 leaves me with 51. 12 divided by 2 leaves me with 6. No further way to simplify. And then go ahead and complete this example on your own. For your answer, you'll get negative 3/5 divided by, changing this into an improper fraction, negative 10 plus 1 over 10. Bring the negative 3/5 down. Negative 10 plus 1 leaves me with negative 9 over 10. I'm going to keep change flip. Negative 3/5 times 10 over negative 9. Multiply across the top, I get negative 30. Across the bottom, I get negative 45. Negative on top and bottom turns positive. These are both divisible by 5. I will get positive 6 over 9. And we're not going to circle this yet because these are both still divisible by 3. You could have recognized that this was divisible by 15 to make it a shorter problem. You'll get 2/3 as your final answer.